All right. It is time for the last of the battle system change videos. This is all the comments that I couldn't find anywhere else to put these questions in the categories that I made up as I put together a list of 120 questions from the Media Tour interviews back in October. And I am going over this post Shadowbringers, pre Endwalker. So the final patch notes are down and available. The game is not yet up. We have already lived through the delay. We've already seen a live letter. So we have information that was not available when these people asked this after mere hours in the Media Tour prior to the embargo date. And so let's dive in, and we are going to start out with Zepla. Zepla actually asked, are there any jobs that you wanted to make changes to, but you just didn't have time? And Yoshi P actually went through and said, well, not really. The biggest thing was the overhaul to Summoner. And when we look at a fundamental level, doesn't mean not final tuning, we're actually pretty happy with where each individual job is. So, for those of you that are unhappy with your job, hopefully that's a sign that when you log in, you'll realize, oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Now, Dengeki, Japanese publication, so pardon me if I missed any of this with translation. It's very difficult. They are very conversational. They are statements, not questions, because it's this back and forth. I picture them sharing a coffee. I don't know if that's how it's done. And these, except for the three big jobs, right? Summoner, Reaper, and Sage, it's basically directly in line with kind of 5.0. So why did what's going on with Bard, right? Now Yoshi says the Bard has a large player population, and the feedback from Bards tends to be divided into two directions. One is I want more support with poetry, right? We want our bow mage. The other is no, I want you to increase your main firepower, the archer. Adjustments will continue until we'll release after the Media Tour in order to strengthen. And we've added supportive actions, such as the what they call the Final Light of God. I don't know which one that translated to, but it's basically you get these stickers and you release this big crazy thing. And so they are looking at that. This is them admitting they are aware that there's two different groups for Bard. I think what they should do is add a Fizz range next expansion that takes over one of those two roles. Personally, I would say the more firepower. I would come out with Corsair. I would base it out of the Marauder Guild in Limsa Lamensa. And I would give it it would be a second gun Fizz ranged with a pistol like Merwib. And I would give it the Archer aspect and let Bard go full-time Bow Mage. And I would totally revamp Bard the whole way up so that it feels like Bow Mage through all the expansions. That's what I would do with unlimited money and dev resources, but this is them admitting they are aware of the two different camps within Bard. Ms. Tech is going to is talking about the variance of healer DPS and are you going to put in more healing requirements so that they don't have to DPS, or are you going to put in more ways to do DPS? Because you've been pruning and simplifying and trying to make us focus on making healing really approachable. What's the plan kind of moving forward? Now, Yoshibi says that the demands or what the healer desires changes on a per player basis. Some just want to heal. Some really just want to do damage. The fundamental thinking to healer adjustments for Shadowbringers and beyond was to make them heal more versus DPS by keeping them busy healing. But we don't want to make content impossible for lower skill players, and we don't want them to ever feel like MP management and healing has to be constant for the entire fight with no breaks ever. And he said that it is also tough to manage, for example, what happens with players on day one that content drops versus later when players are playing better and have better gear. The healing in those two scenarios changes quite a bit. But he will note that now we have Sage, which hopefully will help with people that really want to focus on that offensive side of healing. Okay? Now, from here, Mr. Happy says that taking interactivity with healers, he wants more interesting DPS. So it's a very, very similar question. Do we want to make healing more prominent? Do we want to make interesting, do our DPS? And Yoshi P says, well, they understand why healers want to add DPS at a high level. But new players shouldn't feel they have to DPS and should only be doing so if they have the time. Sage does feel like a DPS one, and he hopes that players that want that will focus more in that area. So a very similar question, a very similar answer. Now from here, we saw a number of cooldowns adjusted. And so Mr. Happy said, well, how come some skills are on 90 seconds, but other skills came down to 60 seconds? And because the theory there, when they reduced those cooldowns, is they said they want people to feel changing job to job, is that there's a tempo that's in your head. There's a pace that feels good. He said, well, if we drop them just all to 60, they would be too similar. And if they stack them all, where every job aligns, then some jobs actually start to feel too busy trying to stay in line with all the other jobs, and that could cause undue stress to those players. Riddle of Wind, for example, we looked at making Monk even faster, but it made Monk too fast. He said, now, we know that people like Mr. Happy can go that fast, but it doesn't mean that they, the developers, want to go that fast. He referenced him by name to him. As for things like ley lines that fall outside of party things, they do have to consider it. If it's too rare, then you might even be willing to stand in bad to protect using your ley lines. But if it's too often, or even if they have it just move and like follow you, or they can have it bring to you, then it either ends up just being a Nokian, or it just ends up being something that doesn't mean anything. So they kept it at 90 because they felt that that avoided the mess of trying to strike a different balance. So it's on a kind of a per ability basis. And that's our miscellaneous job changes. A quick and fast section as the last of the job changes as we charge into Endwalker, as I continue to put out a ton of videos that will be free of Endwalker spoilers early on in Endwalker, so that hopefully you can all get through the story at your own pace, and we will have a great time covering the game en masse beginning no later than January.